Blog Talk Radio.
This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast with Michael Boldea.
All right, welcome to the program, and thank you for joining us. This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast. I am your host, Michael Boldea, and as I like to preface every time we air a recorded program, this is a recording. We are recording it close enough to the air date where, unless within the span of 24 hours, nuclear war arises, it's pretty fresh. We've tried doing the live thing. It always has hiccups. There's always something going on. There's always, a monkey wrench thrown into the works. So we thought this would be the best way to come across to you, to spend these 60-odd minutes together and to discuss a variety of things. Because as those of you who are loyal listeners know, this isn't just straight biblical exegesis, nor is this straight political talk, nor is this strictly cultural commentary. It is a little bit of everything. It's what I feel led to talk to you about, to discuss, to clue you in on. Because everything seems to be happening a mile a minute. Everything seems to be happening so quickly, so fast, that before you have time to digest one story, 6 other stories are waiting in the wings to, take over the spotlight. So some things get overlooked. Some things, the media, especially, the mass media we've come to lovingly know as the fake news, don't cover certain topics, don't cover certain things because they have a narrative and they have an agenda and they try to skew it as much as humanly possible. They try to omit stories because they don't like the way it would make certain people look. They try to inflate stories just because it fits the narrative they are currently trying to shove down the throats of the American populace. So what you get from me is things that I think are of import, not only to the nation as a whole or to the health of the nation as a whole, but also to the church. One of those overlooked stories, one of those things that the media chose not to cover, or if they covered it, they did so sparingly and in a very positive light, was the entire kerfuffle about Netflix pretty much promoting child pornography. Because anyone who's seen even snippets of this gore fest that they've tried to portray as some sort of coming-of-age bubblegum cinema understands that they're eroticizing children, prepubescent children, preteen children. And there are a lot of perverts and pederasts and people that, God will judge, let's put it that way, because I am the father of 2 daughters. So anytime this particular topic comes up, I hate to use the word because it's a newly minted word of the sensitive left, but I get triggered. No, I just get angry. I don't get triggered. Anytime I see someone trying to promote, trying to normalize, trying to mainstream the sexualization of prepubescent children, whether boys or girls, anytime I see someone trying to mainstream child pornography and pedophilia, I just get angry. And those of you that have been listening to the program for a while, those of you that are not new, remember that, 2-3 years ago, I started telling you look to the next thing that they will attempt to normalize. Pedophilia. They are going to attempt to mainstream it. Now, we talked about what California did, passing this law, and apparently Newsom signed it. So it's now a law that if there is less than a 10-year difference between the two individuals engaging in sexual congress, then even though the younger party is not yet mature, is not yet of age, could still be a teenager, or maybe even less than, the individual that is older, the one that was doing the grooming, for lack of a better word, because I'm sorry, if you think that a 12-year-old or an 11-year-old or a 13-year-old even can consent to sexual congress, then you need help too. There's no such thing. Adults can't handle it in the manner in which they ought to. Never mind children. But now in California, you don't get to go into the sexual predator registry. You don't have to, let others know that you are a perv, that you are a pedophile, if the difference is less than 10 years. So on the heels of that, Netflix releases this movie that, by all accounts, is nibble. This is a feast for the eyes of every pervert, and it has gotten more pushback than I thought it would, to be honest with you. And normal, everyday folks are going, all right, maybe this is the line. So as of today or yesterday, Netflix stock was down by, $16 billion. They took a $16 billion haircut, and they're still not taking this movie off of their server. They're not backtracking. They're not apologizing. We're misunderstood. There are closet pedophiles pretending to be reporters coming out in droves and attempting to browbeat normal people for going, this is disgusting and this is wrong. Apparently the way they're spinning it is that, we're just obsessed with the sexualization of minors. Remember, that's the same exact narrative they used when we started talking about how legalizing homosexual marriage would be a slippery slope to something far worse. That is the same narrative they use. All you Christian rightists, you're all obsessed with homosexual congress. No, we just saw where it was going. And for those of you that don't think it can get worse, or for those of you that think we've reached the bottom of the barrel, we haven't. Because the nature of evil is such where there will always be something worse. I recently read a study that made me want to go and wash my eyes out with soap. Apparently, the most consumed pornography on the internet over the last 3 years has been incest pornography, whether fake or real, is whether they're pretending or not. Incestuous relationships and the sexualization thereof have been the most popular for the last 3 years. Do you understand that this isn't as bad as it'll get? Because I've heard some people say, at least it can't get any worse. Want to bet? How much you want to bet? It will get worse. It is inevitable that it will get worse. But people are pushing back. People are saying, hold on a second. Because the self-same people said, we just want equality, are now trying to say, love is love. Age is just a number. So if you have two consenting parties, then what's the harm? Well, we see the harm in the society that we've created. And so people who aren't overtly religious, people who aren't really churchgoers, go, all right, this is disgusting even for me. And it's a very telling thing that every one of these perverts and pederasts and pedophiles and all manner of just slimy individuals are in lockstep with their desire to see a certain man elected to office, even though that man doesn't know his name half the time, even though he jumbles sentences as though he'd gotten mule kicked in the head. It doesn't matter. Now, as evil as some people think the big orange man is, apparently pedophiles and pederasts really hate him for some reason. Again, we discussed this last week. Be intellectually curious enough to ask why. If he was such an evil man, why would all the evil men despise him so? Now, we are going to get into 1 Samuel 17 today because, as I promised, I'll even try to spend a little more time in it. But as I was getting ready to come on with you, and as I pulled up the scripture of 1 Samuel 17, there is something that really spoke to me. David wasn't late. David wasn't early. David was in the right place at the right time in order to fulfill his purpose. And this is going to be the underpinning of today's entire program. God will always put you in the right place at the right time in order for you to fulfill your purpose. See, it's not that most people don't know what they ought to do. It's that they pretend as though they don't know what to do. They allow fear, they allow doubt, they allow uncertainty, and they allow the voices of others to dictate their actions. And we're going to get into this, and we're going to delve a bit deeper because it's important, because a lot of believers are still sitting on the sidelines, staring at their navels, waiting for the end. And many of them, if they were honest with themselves, would acknowledge that they missed opportunities to be effective. They would acknowledge that they missed opportunities to stand. They missed opportunities to speak out. They missed opportunities to do something in order to further the kingdom, to do something in order to further light. What if David had allowed himself to be swayed by the fear that had poisoned the Israelite army? That's a good question, isn't it? What if David had allowed his senses to convince him that Goliath was unbeatable? He saw the man. He saw how large he was. He saw how imposing he was. He heard the words he spoke. And every soldier in the Israelite army, whether seasoned or not, got a little shaky in the knees when they heard Goliath come out and speak. They got a little fearful because they allowed their senses to convince them that Goliath was unbeatable. And this is where we are as a society right now. This is where we are as a nation right now. There are people unwilling to take a stand because they believe that the enemy is unbeatable. It's not. The enemy is not unbeatable. The only reason and the only way that the enemy remains unbeatable is if we do nothing, is if we say nothing, is if we keep telling ourselves that we're waiting to pick our battles, and man, when we catch the right one, you got to catch the wave to surf the board. If it's not this, then really, to be honest, I mean, if attempting to normalize pedophilia doesn't make you angry enough to do something, What will? Because that's another question that we need to contend with. Today is going to be a program about questions. Questions that we need to ask ourselves, questions that we need to ask our pastors, questions that we need to ask our politicians. Because in order for us to move forward, in order for us to progress, in order for us to get beyond the lunacy that seems to be gripping so many people, we need answers. We don't need platitudes. We don't need Joel Ostenisms. We need answers. Honest answers. And if we get honest answers, chances are we're going to bristle at the honest answers that we get. Chances are the answers we get, if they are true and honest, will make us angry. And that's okay. Because nowhere in the Word does it say that the truth needs to make you comfortable. Nowhere in the Word does it say that the truth needs to make you feel good. See, truth compels change. This is another thing that the church has forgotten. Truth compels transformation. Truth compels you to look in the mirror of the Word and acknowledge where you need to allow God to chisel away the things that are not pleasing to Him. All right, we're going to get into 1 Samuel 17 for a little while, and then maybe discuss a couple other things, because there's a lot going on. In case you haven't heard it, the biggest hubbub is now this peace agreement that is spreading throughout the Middle East. Another nation came on board, and they've opened up relations with Israel. And nobody wants to acknowledge it. I mean, if any other president would have succeeded in doing this, if any other president would have succeeded in brokering peace between Israel and its neighbors, they would already have a Nobel Peace Prize sitting in their living room. Obama got one for doing nothing. Now, I know some people are exceedingly excited in the negative, saying that this is it, this is the peace accord that's going to bring on the tribulation. No, it's not. We're not there yet. We discussed it last week. But before all these things, so the thing you need to be concerned about now has to do more with the persecution of the household of faith than it does with any peace accord that Israel agreed to. Because that's another thing. Israel agreed to it. It's not in their deficit. It's not to their detriment. So everyone overly excited about this being the end of the world, look in your own backyard and realize that the persecution that was foretold even from the days of Jesus is now beginning to manifest. And again, you can't just start putting people in prison and yanking their fingernails out with, needle nose pliers. It has to be a slow rollout. Look, even though that we disagree theologically, I think that John MacArthur is a brave man. You know what? And I stand with him and I support him because he took a stand when all of his other fellow pastors decided to go along to get along. He actually took a stand. They're having services in California. They've been threatened with jail. They've been threatened with fines. But see, he is a man that understands the importance of fellowship. He is a man who understands the importance of the children of God coming together in prayer and in song and in teaching. Because if we can't count on each other as the children of God, if we can't count on each other as the family of God, if we can't count on each other as the body of Christ, then inevitably we will feel alone. Inevitably we will feel as though It's us against the world. And that's what the devil wants. That's what the devil enjoys. To make you think that you're all alone, by yourself, having to face everyone else. You're not. You're not alone. Elijah found this out. You're finding this out. You're not alone. But see, once you realize you're not alone, you get a little braver. You get a little more courage up in you. And you begin to stand a little taller, and you begin to speak a little louder. And you begin to push back the darkness. And that's what the darkness doesn't like. That's what the darkness doesn't want. See, when people start pushing back, the darkness has no choice but to retreat. And especially when the church starts pushing back, the enemy has no choice but to retreat. All right. There were other things I wanted to talk about, like the fact, I know, oh, there he goes again, talking about politics. Well, you live in this country too, if you happen to be listening from within the continental United States. And what happens vis-a-vis elections and whatnot affects you. It affects my children. It affects me. It affects my family. So yes, I will discuss it from time to time. No, I don't think Donald Trump is the savior of America. No, I don't think one man can save this nation. Yes, I believe repentance is necessary. But between the two, making the binary decision, going down the list, which is better for life of the unborn, which is better for freedom of the household of faith to congregate, which is better for Christians not being persecuted. When you check off all the boxes, you kind of get an inkling, huh? So I know. Oh, no, heavenly minded, glory. Yes, glory indeed. But if you're still here 4 years hence with a Kamala Harris as president, a woman who proved that you can climb a ladder from a kneeling position, I guess. I don't know. That's basically her only attribute. The other being her hatred of the church. You will know what persecution is, because these people will fill their cabinets with God haters, people who encourage and celebrate everything that the household of faith should be against. Abortion, transgenderism, children being sexualized, all these things. So don't tell me it doesn't matter. Because the next Christian I hear, well, it doesn't really matter, we're going to have words, and they're going to be unkind. So, this is a silver lining, because nowhere during the last election did Donald Trump actually lead in a national poll. Believe it or not. Even though he won the presidency, they had Hillary at 80%, at 90%, at 95%. But now, apparently, national poll, Donald Trump is up 47 to 46. He's taken the lead from the aging and enfeebled Joe Biden in the last polling from Rasmussen. And if this is what the polling says, this is going to be a blowout, because you have to keep your political leanings secret now. You have to not be too outspoken, because unwashed, obese women with a penchant for hairy legs will show up to your house with a bullhorn and try to set your house on fire. Because you're a bigot. But I didn't do anything. Oh, you're still a bigot. racist, bigot, homophobe, whatever. We just got to kill you. And there are certain places in this country where if you attempt to defend yourself, this happened in Milwaukee, like 30 minutes away. They showed up to a man's house. They started protesting in his yard. He brandished a shotgun from inside his home through a window, and the police came and arrested him. Yeah. So not only do national elections matter, local elections, state elections matter. Do a little due diligence. See who will support your right to be free. See who will support your right to be left alone, to worship God and to serve Him and to have opinions that are outside the mainstream. Because these people will not accept anything but for you to walk in lockstep, to agree, to bow, to scrape, to kneel, to say things you know are utterly false, but say them nevertheless just to be left alone. And if history teaches us anything, it's that the more you give in, the more they will attempt to take. Because once you have shown that you are willing to compromise your principles, once you have shown that you're willing to compromise your beliefs, once you have shown that you're willing to bend the knee, for lack of a better term, then that's it. They have you. And they will demand ever more from you because, well, you allowed it. So let's get back into 1 Samuel chapter 17. And here was David showing up just to deliver some food to his brothers. And he was right on time. He was on time to see Goliath come out. He was on time to hear Goliath's speech. And I can just picture David scratching his head, going, why hasn't anybody dealt with this yet? Especially since it had been going on for 40 days, morning and evening. Morning and evening, Goliath would show up and make the declaration. And David couldn't understand how come nobody had stepped up yet. Well, because it was his purpose to step up. David could have justified inaction 1,000 ways. I'm too young, I'm too unskilled, this isn't my place, I just came to bring some cheese and stuff for my brothers. And a lot of us find excuses for not fulfilling our calling. A lot of us find excuses for not fulfilling our purpose. A lot of us, in hindsight, realize that we had been put in a certain situation for a specific reason, and we failed to act. We failed to speak. We failed to do what we knew we ought to have done because we allowed fear to take hold. So here was David, surrounded by the army of Israel. And not one of them had gone out to confront Goliath for 40 days. Now, again, I think David was shocked by the inaction to the point that he asked the question, what's going on? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine? I mean, have you no ears? Can you not hear what he's doing? He's defying the armies of the living God. How come none of you have gone out? And his older brother tried to beat him into silence, or at least browbeat him into silence. And again, we discussed this. It had to have been from a position of pride that David's brother spoke up, because David's declaration hurt his brother's pride. He was the oldest, and he'd done nothing, and here was this kid who just came to bring some cheese, and he's all mouthy. And so his brother asks, "Why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness?" So, even before David said he would take up the charge, even before David said he would confront Goliath, his mere presence on the battlefield was deemed as a slap in the face to his brother. Basically, what his brother was saying is that you're not even worthy to be on the battlefield. Whom have you left these few sheep with in the wilderness? That's your place. Why are you here if that's your place? And there are a lot of so-called spiritual leaders today. There are a lot of so-called evangelists and pastors who use the same psychological trick. They look down on everyone else. They look down on their abilities. They look down on their intelligence. They look down on their pedigree. And they make people feel as though they're undeserving to share the same air. I mean, who was it? One of the old guys, it was Jesse Duplantis and another one who were talking and carrying on about why they needed private jets. And the other guy said, well, you know, if I fly commercial, it's just a tube full of demons. So that does nothing for my spiritual well-being. So it's that same kind of psychological trick. So here's a man who, by definition, is supposed to be shepherding God's people and calling those that are in the darkness towards the light. And he's saying, I can't be around them. They're beneath me. I can't be in a big metal tube with all of them. I need me own private jet. And you know what? Enough people send him money that he got too. So that goes to show you just how discerning the sheep are, doesn't it? That goes to show you just how much wisdom some people use. But I digress. Let's get back to David's reaction. Now, his brother didn't just stop when he said, who have you left those few sheep in the wilderness with? He continues and he says, I know your pride and the insolence of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. And David said, what have I done now? Is there not a cause? Then he turned from him towards another and said the same thing, and these people answered him as the first one did. Now, when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul. So, David's reaction to Goliath and his words were so out of sync. They were so out of the ordinary. His reaction was reported to the king. Basically, David going, why hasn't anyone taken care of this guy, was so out of the ordinary that somebody ran to Saul and go, there's somebody going, we should have done something. And Saul sent for David. Then David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine." Right place, right time, and the opportunity presented itself. And that's another key thing we need to take away from this. If you're taking notes, and I know some of you are because I've gotten your notes, the opportunity presented itself. See, David didn't go searching for the king. David didn't walk around the camp going, "Hey, Saul, where you at? Saul, you know who I am? I'm David, and I'm going to kill Goliath." It wasn't David that sought out Saul. It was Saul that called for David. Not only will God put you in the right place at the right time to fulfill your purpose, He will also make the way. You don't have to force it. The opportunity will present itself. You don't have to try to manufacture opportunity. And this is where a lot of believers get trounced by the devil. This is where a lot of believers fail miserably. They think they're responsible for manufacturing their own opportunity. You are not. David didn't go searching for Saul. Saul sent for David. The opportunity will present itself. You don't have to go chasing after it, because I've seen it more often than not. People get excited about a calling on their life, and man, they start trying to manufacture opportunity because they get impatient. Come on, Lord, the time, is passing, the clock's ticking. I'm not a spring chicken anymore, and there's so much I want to do. Look, let me put it this way. When God provides the opportunity for you, you will get more accomplished within a matter of minutes than you would have gotten accomplished in a matter of decades had you manufactured your opportunity. That's a deep thing. Believe me when I tell you, especially for those of you that are in ministry, for those of you that have a calling on your lives, you need to put that somewhere and look at it once a week. When you allow God to provide the opportunity rather than you trying to manufacture the opportunity, you will get more done in the blink of an eye than you would have in an entire lifetime. You have to realize that even if David had tried to get an audience with the king, even though his brothers were soldiers in the army, it probably would have been impossible for him to do it. I mean, he was a king after all. Saul was a bona fide king of a nation. He was on a battlefield with his armies. I don't know which of his lieutenants or generals would have gone, Your Highness, King Saul, there is a shepherd boy that would like a moment of your time. There is a shepherd boy that would like a one-on-one, face-to-face meeting with you. That individual probably would have been laughed out of the tent because, they had tents back then. That's what would have happened if David would have tried to manufacture his opportunity. Look, again, just dwell on this for a second. A shepherd boy who'd come to deliver some food for his brothers trying to work his way up the chain to get an audience with the king. Just imagine how improbable, if not impossible, that would have been. But see, David was just sincere. He wasn't trying to manufacture anything. He wasn't trying to seem brave. He wasn't trying to be the hero. Because I've heard this from preachers, and you need to be the hero of your own story. No, you don't. You just need to be obedient. You need to be a servant. You don't need to be the hero of your own story. Sometimes you're not the hero. Sometimes you're not the guy climbing the ladder, jumping over the wall, cutting the enemy down. Sometimes you're just that guy at the bottom of the ladder holding it so it doesn't tip over while the guy that's going to go kill the enemy does it. Be the hero of your own story. That's more Joel Osteen malarkey. Because that's what happens when people are told, you need to be in the spotlight. You need to be the hero of your own story. They go chasing after it. And eventually, after 1,000 failures and rejections, they get bitter at God because they weren't the hero of their own story. Well, don't be bitter at God, be bitter at Joel. Send the book back, request a refund. You need to be where God needs you. You need to be a servant. You need to be willing to step up when it is required of you, but you also need to be willing to go and deliver food to your brothers who are on the battlefield if that is required of you. Don't try to make or manufacture your own opportunities. You'll fail. Because that vision of grandeur that you have in your head may not be the vision God has for your life. And so your vision and God's vision are in conflict with each other. And if your vision and God's vision are in conflict with each other, you're never going to achieve your vision, nor are you ever going to walk in the vision that God had for you. So you're basically stuck in a stalemate. You're never going to be fulfilled because you're always pulling towards you while God's pulling you towards Him. And there's always this rubber band effect. Just be willing to be where you're needed. And once you're there, be patient. Wait for the opportunity to present itself. Now when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul. Again, unreal, isn't it? During all of this madness, because it had been 40 days and 40 nights, eventually something had to give. Saul was under enormous pressure. Israel was under enormous pressure. And somebody went and goes, there's a kid speaking out of turn. He's talking about how come nobody's taken out this Philistine. Unbelievable how God works things out, isn't it? Now, when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul, and he sent for him. Then David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this." Now, another lesson for those of you taking notes. When the opportunity presents itself, seize upon it. I'm going to repeat that because it's this is good stuff. I could put a CD together and charge $20. And yet here I sit talking to you. You're welcome. I kid, of course. But just, again, this is important. When the opportunity presents itself, seize upon it. Once Saul called David, and David was face to face with Saul. There was no hesitation in David's declaration. There was no, let me think about it. Let me make a plan. Hold on, I got to go get my other slingshot. There was an instant commitment by David. So when the opportunity presents itself, don't hesitate, don't dawdle, seize upon it. Then David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "You are not able to go against this Philistine, to fight with him. For you are a youth, or a youth, if you will, and he a man of war from his youth." And now we do a complete 180 or 360, whichever one fits, to what we discussed earlier. It's not as though David didn't have opportunities to be discouraged. It's not as though David didn't have opportunities to allow fear to worm its way into his heart. Not only had he seen the fear among the armies of Israel, not only had he heard Goliath's words and seen his size, now the king is telling him, "I'm sure your heart's in the right place, kid, but you're not going to be able to do this." Because that's pretty much what Saul was saying. I appreciate the gumption. I appreciate the boldness, but you're not able to go up against this Philistine. You're a youth. You're a kid. And he, a man of war from his youth. Another chance for David to back down. Another chance for David not to seize upon the opportunity that God had presented him with. Because if you contextualize this story and you read it as it sits, there's no way that you can conclude it was anything other than the hand of God that provided this moment for David to stand and fulfill his purpose. And you can look at it from a different angle and go, this was the enemy's last attempt through Saul to make David not walk in the calling to which he'd been called. Because you have to realize that every life has a pinnacle moment. Every life has that moment that defines the existence of an individual. And it's different for everyone. But you can look back on your life and you can pinpoint the moment. That moment that defined the rest of your life, the rest of who you are, and everything else. For us as believers, it's the moment that we were saved. The moment we knew that we had died and been buried with Christ, the moment we knew that we were reborn, the moment we knew that heaven was waiting for us, the moment we knew that we had been adopted, the moment we knew that when we called out Father, He would say, "Here I am." The moment we knew that we would never again walk alone in this world, the moment we knew that He would be with us, the moment we knew that though we walked through the fire, He would be there. For David, his defining moment, the one thing that changed his life, took it on a completely different course, was his confrontation with Goliath. Now, God had chosen him to be king. He'd been anointed by Samuel. But, just as an intellectual exercise, what do you think would have happened if David would have lent his ear to Saul? And when Saul said, "You're not able to go against this Philistine. You're a boy. Physically, you are incapable. This is coming from someone that knows war. This is coming from someone who is king." And he's looking down at David and going, "You can't do this. He will kill you." What if David would have said, "You're right"? What if David would have gone back to tending his sheep? Huh? Good question, isn't it? When the opportunity presents itself, seize upon the opportunity. And when you know that it was a God-ordained thing, when you know that God made it happen, then no matter how many detractors you have, no matter how many people tell you you can't do it, no matter how many people say, "You gonna die," no matter how many people tell you you're too young or too old, too feeble, you're not eloquent enough, just remember, it was God that ordained the opportunity. Or in other words, it's God who opened the door. So walk through it. See, David would not be deterred. Even though the king said, no, kid, you're going to die. You're too young. This man has forgotten more about war than you know. Even though I may be optimistic, you're going to die. But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck it and killed it." Now, at this moment, I'm imagining Saul's face. And although we will never know, I have a sneaking suspicion that there was disbelief on Saul's face. Because Saul had already judged David. He'd looked at him with eyes of flesh. He'd seen that he was a young boy. And he told him to his face that he would die if he went up against Goliath. And so now for Saul to hear that David had killed a bear and even a lion, I'm sure that the disbelief was properly displayed. To get back to the conclusion of today's hour, because we are quickly running out of time, and I don't want to get into the next part of it because it gets good. This is where my daughter perks up, because I've told her the story of David and Goliath repeatedly. And when it's close to showtime, as it were, when it's close to David taking the battlefield, she always perks up. And now her little sister listens right along because she's almost 3. But we're going to get into this next week. For now, I thank you for being with us. I thank you for listening. May God bless you. May God keep you. And Gino, if you've got anything to say, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mike. I just want to say that Mike and I will be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, September 27th, and that is at the Pentecostals of Wisconsin Church and Outreach, and it is at 6021 West Lincoln Avenue, West Allis, Wisconsin, at 2 o'clock p.m. Afternoon service. Again, that's Sunday, September 27th. The church and ministry name is the Pentecostals of Wisconsin, 6021 West Lincoln Avenue, West Allis, Wisconsin, at 2 o'clock p.m. Keep me in prayer this Friday. I will be in LaPorte, Indiana. I will be Friday night singing at a brand new church and outreach there, and then Sunday giving the message at the Sunday service. And I will post more information on my Facebook page about that meeting that people can go to. If you'd like to listen to this broadcast beyond our recording of it, you can go to YouTube, type in The Light of Truth, and then Michael Boldea, and all our radio shows for the last year and a half are on there. And also, please consider going to the Hand of Help website and checking out very important information about what we're going through and what's going on today that Brother Dudeman and Mike have shared about through books, handofhelp.com. Again, www.handofhelp.com. I would urge you to check out the Battle Ready Believer, and also. And right now, many people around the country are ordering books because they know that trouble is around the corner and already happening. One final note, keep us in prayer as well. September 24th in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin at 6:30 p.m. We will have the Sacred Assembly at Barrie, Barrie Park. And this is a prayer and worship time that we are having in different cities in Wisconsin. And so if you are in the Wisconsin area, it will be Thursday night, September 24th, 6:30 p.m. at Barrie, Barrie Park in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, our Sacred Assembly of Prayer and Worship. Thank you for listening to The Light of Truth. Thank you for listening to today's broadcast, The Light of Truth, with Michael Boldea. If you would like to order a copy of today's broadcast, please visit our website at handofhelp.com. If you have questions about our ministry, you can email us at handofhelpoffice@aol.com or simply call us at 920-206-9910. God bless you.